to the Farm to Future podcast. Here we discuss how you can harness the opportunities in agriculture for your personal development and employ agribusiness models to drive your dreams or goals for food security. You will also hear stories of how nations have turned their fortune around employing agriculture. This is not just a podcast for content making sake. We have a goal of simplifying agriculture and agribusiness for you. Did you know that the agriculture sector contributes over $200 billion in added value to the US GDP annually? In 2023 alone, the export value of agriculture products in the US is estimated to be well over $170 billion US. In Nigeria, the National Bureau of Statistics says Nigeria exported agricultural products worth over 84 billion naira in the third quarter of 2022 alone. So how do you find your place in agriculture and the business of agriculture? This is your show, and I am your host for this episode. My name is Daniel Odeyemi. By the way, can you just click the subscribe button already? Alright, thank you. And ensure that you share your friends and families as well. I'll be right back. The Farm to Future podcast continues after this break. Hi there, welcome to the Farm to Future podcast, where we discuss how you can harness the many opportunities in the agriculture sector for personal development, for productivity, for nation building. My name is Daniel Odeyemi. I'm your host on this episode of Farm to Future. I would like you to please click on the subscribe button and of course share with your friends and family. We have a lot to talk about on this episode of Farm to Future, and I have my guest with me, an agropreneur of over 15 years experience, Oludare Mudashiru. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Daniel Odeyemi. It's always a pleasure.
All right. The other time we had beautiful stories, but with a lot of didactic lessons from Oludare Mudashiru. And we'll continue in that line on this episode to take a look at how you and I can take advantage of the many opportunities in the agriculture sector. But permit me, Oludare Mudashiru, let's talk about Nigeria a bit. I know we've looked at economies of the world. We've briefly taking a look at some nations who have turned their fortune around employing agriculture. In fact, we've been able to establish in the previous episodes how agriculture has been a dominant tool in shaping and imbuing nations of the world.
Exactly.
And the role of individuals in such enterprise. Now, when it comes to Nigeria, we have a lot of capacity. We are blessed with resources, good climatic conditions for a number of crops. How is it that we are unable to sustain the growth when it comes to agricultural development? Is it about our national policy on agriculture? Well, we're getting it wrong as a nation.
Well, thank you for that question. And I'd like to say that the fact that as a nation, we haven't been able to make the most of what we have as potential and opportunities within the agricultural sector has been fundamentally become a problem to us as a people. When you look at those countries that took advantage of the potential in the agricultural sector. They were certain, they knew exactly what they wanted to achieve with their engagement within that sector, to a point that they could even go as far as facilitating certain activities in the world to their own favor, including colonization. Because you find out that what you call colonization was pretty much an opportunity for certain governments, for certain people to create a production field and also have access to unlimited labor. All right. And that policy, of course, against the backdrop of wanting to achieve that surplus value, they pursued colonization as an agenda. So if you look at that, yes, nations in Africa are independent of their colonial master, okay, and that colonial relationship. But you find out that nations of Africa is yet to be decolonized. Yes.
How do you mean?
Yes, you see, the logic is simple. You want to ensure, coloniality is what we are still experiencing. Yeah. Because the essence of colonization is for them to continue to have the market for finished products, of which the raw materials were taken from various colonial society or colonized society. You see, the search for market, the search for labor, the search for cheaper raw material still exists even in the current global economic setting. And so, as a nation, we haven't really decolonized our minds. Because what colonization does for you as a people is it makes you absolutely dependent
on another entity.
It makes you absolutely dependent. And we are yet to pursue an agenda for decoloniality. Decolonizing our mind. Our means of running our own administration, our means of setting national priorities in terms of foreign policy, in terms of national advancement policy, national development policy, how we measure economic progress, how we measure human capital development by, if you look at the HDI, Human Capital Development Index, we still have to wait on the approval of institutions that have been established by this colonial relationship. So there is that dependency approach to governing ourselves as a people. So we haven't yet moved away completely from our reliance on our affiliations, our connections, our relationship with those colonial entities. That's why we are always in search of quick revenue from exports. And what are those resources that top the lists of exports item or exported item to be exported? You find out that they are often commodities that the colonial masters still want and that they are willing to pay for almost immediately.
For their own value chain.
For their own value chain and for the control of the global economy. So, with that in view, we have not, I mean, imagine that we have to export maybe a produce like yam, for example, and it's a major item on the list of the demand of our colonial forebear. You know, that we would have come up with production policy, regulatory policy, regulatory framework, exports guidelines, because the colonial master or our former master wants that item on the list. And so we would have been doing everything that we can or everything that we could as a nation to ensure that such an item becomes a major driver of the economy. Not because as a people we are convinced that we need to do it, but because it has become a demanded item by the so-called global leaders who would now have been running from pillar to post to ensure that their demands are met.
Well, is production not supposed to react to the forces of demand and supply?
Of course, that's exactly what I'm saying. The production would have responded to the forces of demand and supply from our colonial master. Just the same way the production of crude has always responded to the forces of the demand of the Brent crude purchasers and the US lights. So that is what it is. And the same way production has responded to the demand for the request for cocoa bean. So why hasn't production responded to the demand of yam and cassava? Why hasn't production responded to the demand for plantain and bananas from Nigeria? Why hasn't production responded to the demand for cotton
or wheat
from Nigeria? How come that production has only responded to the demand for crude oil? So when you look at that, you find out that for whatever is worth, the neo-colonization agenda has been a major determinant of what is being developed and what has remained undeveloped and untapped resources of the nation.
And I did just hit me now, Oludare Mudashiru. With this narrative you just gave, it means that a nation such as Nigeria will have to think our way out of the conundrum. And that means also that at the individual level, we'll also have to think our way out of whatever economic mess, or whatever economic situation that we get to probably find ourselves. And it's good we're having this conversation on the Farm to Future podcast. So for our viewers who want to make a decision as to what subsector of the agriculture sector should they focus on, where they can, have or create value, what should be the parameters for them to make their decisions? And I say so because you look at the sector, it's wild. You have crop production, You have animal husbandry. I mean, not to talk about the value chain to all of that. What do you have to say?
Well, I think where we need to start from is very simple. The fundamentals, we need to get it right. Why is agricultural production important? I think fundamentally, we need to look at ourselves as a people. We need to look at our needs as a people. We need to look at um, what will make more sense to us as a people. We need to look at what will bring about the appreciation for how much engagement we are having within the agricultural sector. You see, if you do a breakdown of the nutritional need of about 200 million people, 200 million people, and we are looking at that market, focus on that market alone, that we want to produce for 200 million people. What are our feeding requirements? How much do we need as a people? By the time we are able to answer that question, either on the individual level or from the individual level to the national scale, we would be able to come up with a set of objectives and set targets. And the objectives and the targets that we arrive at becomes the driving force. Now, if we scale that up a little bit more to, I mean, the 200 million that I stated, of course, you understand where I got that from. Then we now go and say, well, added to that 200 million is another 100 million from maybe the west coast of Africa. That what are those comparative crops that we can produce from this side that are needed on that coast? And then we go to the Central Africa to think towards the north, think towards the east, and think towards the south. Now, that is talking about playing within the African space and allowing the need within the African space to become the driver. Now, what that does is it opens up the business opportunities, the interactions between geographical boundaries, between sovereign boundaries. Okay, so by the time we look in that direction and we begin to think as a people on how we intend to maximize those opportunities that such critical analysis would have thrown at us, then we also integrate such opportunities into our foreign policy from the economic side. I mean, by the time we are able to do all of that, we would have come to a point where we would see in reality what the needs are, what the opportunities are, and what resources are needed to harnessing those opportunities. So, I mean, we will then be able to take it to the level of individual responsibility, personal responsibility that come. If these needs exist, and I am willing to work my economic emancipation as an individual, by the time we begin to work as individual, we will come to a point where collective effort will be necessary. So, necessitated by this collective effort, we will now begin to see the national impact, or we now begin to see the actions and the activities that we are, engaging at the personal level, at individual level, having national impact. So for any development in any society, in any community, you need engagement at that level of personal responsibility. And once that cumulates, it begins to translate to the communal, the social, and the larger society. So individuals can now begin to say, I have opportunities in the food production sector because of the demand for food by man and for livestock. So, and I mean, for some, you find people that would create niches to say, oh, I'm going to be facing, the livestock session. I'm going to be producing enough feedstock for livestock. While some would say, oh, I'm going to be doing more for humans. Okay. And some would say, oh, yes, I'm going to be doing for the two. I'm going to be focusing on industrial produce that must feed into the industrial processes. And some will say, oh no, I'm interested in doing the same thing that you are doing for food, but I am targeting the population of Africans in diaspora.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if you're targeting the population of Africans in diaspora, most definitely you have to think along the line of value chain.
And what will be their greatest
Of course. So all of these move will be necessitated by one form of demand, all right, or the other. So that's how we need to begin to look at it. Individuals need to begin to look at these things to say, we will not wait for it to come from a top to bottom manner. We want to see how we can do from bottom up, and if possible we do top to bottom, and somewhere in between we can meet. Then you have that meeting point. By the time you have that meeting point, it becomes a lot easier for so much to happen.
Oludare Mudashiru, that's quite strategy, and I think, I mean, on the show, part of the essence is to be able to create strategies, opportunities. Okay, I mean, you've looked at it in a holistic way, and you've also brought it to the individual level. However, permit me to ask you that, I mean, for those who have interest, are there comparative advantages? For instance, is there a comparative advantage to doing livestock than doing crop production?
Well, I think at the level at which we are at in Nigeria, we should not even be thinking about the comparative advantage of one over the other at this level, because the level we are at in terms of engagement in the sector is still very minimal. It's still very minimal. What I tell people often is that this sector is a job to be done sector. It's not about which one is better. It's not about which one. It's about the fact that all hands needs to be on deck. So whether you are in livestock or you are in crop production, or in fact, if you have the capacity, you can be in both at the same time. Every one of us needs to be there. We don't have enough to eat, for example, as a nation.
Because of the necessity.
No, we don't have enough to eat. We are not taking, I mean, you look at the statistics. We are not taking enough in terms of vitamins. We are not taking enough in terms of protein, either from crop protein or animal protein. All right. I mean, so much that we need. So it's not the time for us to be looking at comparative advantage. It's a time for us to talk about our needs and how much shortfall we are having. That shortfall is what will necessitate the decision that we will take as far as the production curve is concerned. So, for example, in my case, what we did was to say, where do we need to come in with with our own interest, with the energy level with which we were coming into the sector. And we broke it down. We said, come, there's food shortage. There's a need for us to gain that mastery of what happens within the food sector. The arable sector of the crop production in the agricultural, the larger agricultural space. And it was easier for us to conclude that need for us to facilitate the mastery of the production process for food crop the space was there. And so we just focused on that, and we've done that consistently for more than 10 years. So with the position we are at now, we are now progressing into diversifying as a result of our experience and as a result of the surplus value that we've generated. Okay, fine. The next thing we need to now do is to move into the livestock sector, where we begin to rear animal
As a crop farmer.
Yes, because we started with crop production, not because we wanted to remain as food crop production or food crop producers alone. We knew that at some point we would have to expand. And so since we have covered all the spectrum, the food crop production spectrum, the next for us was is to look at the livestock space.
All right, so I like the way this discourse is going. The reason being that I recall that statistics say that about 35 million Nigerian children from under age 5 are malnourished. Another say there's about 12 million Nigerian children that have stunted growth. Oludare Mudashiru, Nigeria should not have a problem with hunger or food shortage. You understand why I'm bringing it down to the individual level?
Yes. And you can see that's why I've also been saying that we need to take it away from the national discourse level to the level of individual responsibility. Now, the logic for me is every time people say, oh, the government have to do this, the government have to do that. Remember, on one of the episodes of this podcast, we were talking about land acquisition and, land matters. And I said, come, just the same way you have seen the private sector build other sector. I mean, you have them do bidding, even for oil blocks. Those biddings were massively paid for. Okay, so nobody was expecting the government to license the oil blocks for free. So people would go, make bids, spend their money. It was almost as if they were buying. And they would buy and then begin to prospect. So it's about the same thing for this sector. Thus far, it's been informal in its approach. Going forward, we need to come as individuals and begin to do things on the scale of our national need. Now, bringing that back to the community. Say, for example, you could have data, or you could get the statistics of how many children are within your community, and you want to be sure if they are getting enough supply of eggs. Their parents should be able to buy if the prices are affordable, and haven't been convinced that their child or their children need at least one egg per day. So, and you've made it affordable for those parents. As a private poultry farmer who is absolutely looking at production of eggs.
Well, as much as I like your perspective, concerning this, because you're speaking to our viewers at the moment. However, does that not take away the responsibility of the government. There are other nations of the world that had agricultural policies and they've stayed on it. They've worked on it and it's working. So what has happened to Operation Feed the Nation?
Hold on, Daniel. See, wait, listen. You are almost missing it. Don't let mix things up and miss it as we mixing it up. Now, this is it. Before you talk about the government, a government is a representation of the people. If I, as a person, can't see the reason why I should make contribution at that personal level, at that individual level, if I find my way into a system where I become a member of the governing structure of that community, I would also not be able to do much because I didn't see it at a personal level. So we are a product of our collective individualism. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say.
I do.
At the individual level, if we are all committed, we have applied the all hand on deck approach. When we come together to then make decisions for governance and for policy, we cannot do anything other than what we have always been doing. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
So it's about our side.
If we were, okay, I'll bring it down again with this analogy. We have a community of people. In that community, there are just hundreds of them there. The 100 are always working. Always working. You come in the morning, they are working. You come in the afternoon, they are working. You come in the evening, they are working. You come in the night, they are working. So when they have the opportunity to now say we would appoint people who will represent us and make decisions that will be binding on us as a collective, you can be sure what will form the agenda of their discourse at that level. Because everyone would, in fact, they will be trying to make law and promulgate law. They will be trying to put in place policies that will help everybody, because what they are only used to has been work, and work. It will take someone who is not from that their space to be able to bring them and say, no guys, why are you always just working? Let's do something else. Because that is what they have been used to. They will only make policies that will continue to facilitate what they have been used to.
But how about great policies that we've had in this nation that were not seen through?
Now you need to also ask yourself, who were the sponsor of those policies? If I happen to have been, okay, take for example, you mistakenly decide to make me either an SA or an SSA to a governor on agricultural matter. At that level, I'm just saying, at that level, not even a commissioner. Or maybe you then decide to say, okay, we make him a commissioner. Or for whatever reason, out of the blues, or the minister for agriculture. You can be sure what would be the kind of things that I would likely do. I'm not likely to walk too far away from what I have been used to. So, an apple does not fall far from, right? You understand? So, that rule exists and it's a truism in any society. So, I want to say that at the level of individual responsibility, we need to do much more than the government can do for us.